Hi everybody, well this is what the Rubanoid looks like that I'm going to give you self-instruction on here in a moment. I wanted to play it with some music. That's what the more or less finished product looks like. And so now I get to get on building the frame, part one. Hello, so we're going to start making the framework for this beastie. So we're going to start with these wooden slats. Now, I bought these at our local Walmart. They're just small. There's 6 of them. They're small plywood slats like this. Not much to see here. But we're going to cut several of them out. We're going to mark them. We're going to cut them 6 at 7 inches, 2 at 5 inches. All right, get this marked out. Get it. Okay, so now we've got all our pieces cut out. We're going to separate out our 2 5-inch pieces. So we've got 2 5-inch pieces, 6 7-inch pieces. Okay, so we've got these here. We've separated out our 5-inch pieces. Mark these down the center and 1/2 inch up from the top and 1/2 inch down from the bottom. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is cut those at the right, or drill those with the right size hole to fit your threaded rod. So that's going to be the last thing you'll need for this part is your threaded rod, 2 pieces of threaded rod and nuts. And okay, so now we've got our 6 vertical pieces drilled through. I wanted to say something about this. Drilling these, I used a drill press, but whichever way you do it, put a piece of wood underneath it. So because this plywood has a tendency to split open, so when you're drilling it, put a piece of wood under it that you can drill through. So it'll hold the little pieces of plywood up and they won't split out when you drill them. And also, when you cut them, if you can use a finer blade, I used kind of a standard blade, so it made the edges a little rough, and I had to cut off some little chips and pieces and things. They will split out, so you'll need to take something and smooth off the little things, unless you have a really fine blade saw you cut them with. And now we're going to measure. We're going to pick 2 of these, and we're going to put our 5-inch pieces in the middle. And we'll measure that and glue those together. And that's because with the thinness of this, it was just flexible enough. See it flex a little bit there. Just flexible enough to that the magnets, when glued to it, cause the whole thing to flex. And they're bent, and you can't get a good small magnetic gap, which is what you want. You want the magnetic gap as small as you can get it while the diaphragm moves freely. So we're going to measure these out, center and glue in the 2 5-inch pieces there. So these are 5-inch pieces are just going to be centered in the center of 2 of your 7-inch pieces. Glue those right in place. And while we're at it, I might as well mention the threaded rod. So these pieces, when you get them all together, will all go on a pair of threaded rods like this. So you need them to all be lined up perfectly. So make sure you drill all the holes evenly. because all your wooden pieces are going to reside like so. So make sure they all fit on your rods. And I wanted to mention about the rods also. It'd be nice if you could just buy 2 6-inch pre-cut pieces, which some of you might be able to, but I had to hacksaw my own from a longer piece. So if to hacksaw your own, there's a couple things you should be aware of. You'll need a file. If you hacksaw it, you'll need a file on each of the ends because you want the nuts to screw on and off easily. So once you hacksaw it, just use a file on the ends till you can get the nuts on and off easy. That's about the only tip about those. Then once we've got that glued together, once we've got these glued together, whichever 2 we pick that our magnets are going to go on to, then we'll glue the magnets on that. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and measure these out and glue the pieces on, and after that we'll be just about ready for assembly. We're going to need a number of nuts, so we're going to need 12 magnets per end, so one on the outside and inside of the pieces of each of these. That makes them very adjustable, and our I guess we'll need actually 8 nuts per side because I got 2 of these being held together by one set of nuts when we get down to it. So you'll need 16 nuts that'll fit your threaded rod. Okay, so you're going to want to glue the neodymium magnets on at this point to these goodies. So let's get the audio right here. Okay, so you're going to want to glue the neodymium magnets onto these sections where you glued the 5-inch piece to the 7-inch piece there, and the magnets are going to go on 4 across, and I was going to show you that, but this is what happens. As you can see there, 2 of the 4 magnets popped off because I used my contact cement instead of epoxy, which I've been using. So make sure you use a good glue on these because the neodymium magnets are very strong, and they pull themselves right loose from the glue, as you can see there. So let me see if I can adjust the picture a little bit and show you how these are supposed to go on there properly. Okay, so the infrared lets you see the blood vessels in my fingers, so my hands look funny, but this setting is the best to actually see what's going on. So you're going to glue 4 magnets on like this on each side, okay, but they need to be in a specific polarity. So it doesn't matter which one you start with, but magnets flip this way. So you've got this side that's repelling, this side now that's attracting strongly. So the way you want these is you want the ones on one side to be one polarity and the ones down the other side to be the opposite. So these both repel, okay, this magnet. So you want these both the same polarity. So, and this side, so without flipping the magnet, this side repels and this attracts, okay? So when you're gluing this last magnet on, if it attracts that side, it's wrong. So you're gluing this last magnet on, you need to make sure this, when it repels like this, okay, so the side that repels are up. So you flip that, and then you put your glue on the underside and put that on there. And this last one's going to be a little tricky because when you attach it, it's going to push apart. It magnetically repels there. And it's going to be attracted to the other one there. So you'll have to push it together and hold it against the push and clamp it down till your glue dries. And don't make the mistake I did and try using your contact cement, which has worked fine for everything else. It didn't glue to these magnets very well. So they popped off, and the magnets on this one popped off. The minute I brought the two together, they just sucked the magnets together, and that was the end of that. And you want to do that for each side. And since the ends are identical, it doesn't matter which way you do it. What you'll end up with is it'll repel one direction if you're doing it right. Doing it right, it'll repel one direction, and if you flip the end of one, then it'll attract. And don't let it snap attract together, because it'll break the magnets. See there, we just pulled another one loose. Magnets are too strong for that contact cement I use, so make sure you use a good cement such as epoxy, which is what I'm going to have to redo these with. And I will let that dry, which takes overnight, and get back to you for the rest of this video. I'll show you what they look like when they're together and where to go next on putting this thing together. Alrighty then, so now we've got these more or less where we want them. We've got all 4 magnets on there. Okay, on each one. Now, these are epoxied on since the other glue didn't hold. I'm going to do a quick reminder to anybody making this. On these, you have one polarity of magnets down one side, and then you flip the magnet polarity for the other side, okay? So same thing over here, one polarity on one side, flip the magnet polarity for going down the other side. When you put them together, you should have the end result at one position. They repel. See, these are repelling pretty seriously. Even at that. What's happening is they'll snap to the other side, since they've got, but if they're straight on, they'll repel. And if they're straight on, if you flip one of them 180 degrees, they attract. Okay? Flip one, oops, and they repel when they're held straight apart. Okay? They'll attract if you go to the side. So that's what you should end up with. One way repel, flip 180, and they should attract. Okay, and you got them on there right. Now, I recommend gluing a piece of felt on the back and on the sides here. And this is going to stop internal reflections that can vary the sound in ways we don't want, the frequency response. And make sure when you get these that the felt does not exceed the top of the magnets. You want the top of the magnets to be absolutely clear, because the voice coil is going to move in and out of there and you don't want it to rub. So same thing on both. Make sure the magnets are actually clear on both sides. Near the top, that sticks out a little bit right there, so I'm going to have to trim that down with an X-Acto knife. And the same thing on these pieces. Take 2 more of these pieces, and they're going to have felt on one side. You want the other side clear and open, because this is going to be your clamping surface for your diaphragm. So, same thing, cover them there, and on the sides, make sure you get the sides, but you don't want that top surface covered. So, your diaphragm is going to clamp between this and one of the other ones, and you don't want that to interfere. So, once you get that ready, we're more or less ready to start putting that together. Now, we're going to take your 2 6-inch rods, which we should have talked about earlier. I cut these from a single piece. And we're going to take our nuts and we're going to put them on there, and we're going to start putting the wood pieces together at this point. Okay, so it's good to have your measuring tool handy. First couple of nuts you're going to put on right in the middle of the rod. So we're going to screw them down to the 2 nuts that meet in the middle of the 3-inch point. Now some of that nut got a lot of glue on it. Don't worry about being too exact right now, just get them approximate. You don't need to park them too close together either. Leave a little bit of gap for now. This is one of the adjustments we'll make later. Do the same thing with both rods. So yeah, we're just kind of approximate there for the first part. These two, okay? You start with your magnets. And you can put them on here. And if you're putting these on the correct direction, it's when they're attracting, okay? You put them on so that they're repelling. You won't get the same good result. Put these on where they attract, okay? So they're pulling together. Oops. I guess that was kind of lame. Yeah, so here we go. So those nuts hold us apart right at the moment. That's just what you want. A little gap between your magnets. Okay. You're going to put on a couple more nuts. And again, all these are going to be approximate. We'll measure them out and get more exact when we go to put the diaphragm on. Give yourself some space there. Don't screw it too far on. Oh, actually, sorry. Next nut goes basically up against the back of this previous one. Okay. And then two more. Now we're going to make a little mark on our felt pieces here before we go further. Our two that we mounted the felt on one side. So get the back side up. And what we're going to do is put a line straight down the dead center of these. And that's what we're going to line up our diaphragm to. And overall, try to get these measurements on the wood as good as you can, because that's going to determine how your diaphragm lines up, and that'll determine how well it sits and works. Then you'll put these pieces on here with a felt towards the inside. And eventually you're going to put these over and clamp to the diaphragm. So at this point, you might want to try and even things out a little bit. I guess it really doesn't matter that much. And there's one more little thing we're going to do here. We're going to glue some feet onto this. So pick the side you want for a bottom. And for the feet, I've just got some pieces of this plywood. I'm going to use some hot glue on there. We can fix these better later on. But for right now, I'm going to glue them right to the felt pieces so that they're about centered. If you're better at me than keeping things neat, you might want to measure this and make sure these things are exactly centered and such. I'm making this without any real concern for attractiveness at this point. I want it to be more functional. I want to put a little more on the sides around these at the bottom to reinforce it. But you want to be careful around the outside that you don't end up with too much glue, because you've got your next piece needs to clamp onto that. So I'm probably going to have to clean it up the outside of my piece, but I'm just going to do that with a pocket knife real quick, because you want our other pieces to fit on there. So see, I'm just removing any of the hot glue that got splashed over it that I accidentally put on the outside, not thinking. So now we're getting close to putting our diaphragm on, but you want to make sure that your clamp pieces are going to go on with the feet in place, and you're not going to have a problem getting them on there and clamped tight. So we're pretty good there. Could be that if you cut one a little long, you may have to trim it a bit or sand it down. As it turns out, these are working perfect for me. So it'll clamp together great. I've still got a little bit of residue on the bottom of this one I need to get off. So now we're going to start adjusting our screws. We're going to start with the outer sides. What you want is this type of situation. So we're going to put our screws on, and how we're going to adjust this is we're going to adjust these outer ones so that we have about a 1/2 inch of thread showing. That's because we want to put wings on it later, which is something that's not required but highly recommended, as it'll increase the sensitivity to a certain extent, and they're easy enough to make. Yeah, I said a 1/2 inch, but I meant a 1/4 inch. So with the nut, it's like a 1/2 inch. Basically what we want is a 1/4 inch of thread exposed so we can put our wings on it later. And make sure these are pretty even. Get them spaced pretty even. This is your start of lining these things up. And we'll start that as our first alignment because we want to get these things pretty much centered. And you don't want to tighten these bottom ones tight either, because you're going to have to take them back off again to put the diaphragm on. Continue on, bring your inside nuts up to match the adjustment of the outside ones, because you're going to remove those in a minute, but you keep the inside ones where you put them.